Hello, and tonight on Pole Position, we're asking how do we restore trust in politics and politicians? And what will the House of Commons likely look like after the general election? And is the rise of hard right reform UK bad for Britain? All that and more coming up on Pole Position this evening, and I'm delighted to be joined by Harriet Harman, former Labour Cabinet Minister, Deputy Leader, Acting Leader, and Mother of the House until she decided not to stand in this general election. Evening, Harriet.
Good evening.
Are you missing the campaign trail because you fought 11 elections all the way back to 1982 when you won that by-election in Peckham?
Well, I'm not missing the campaign trail because I'm actually out on the campaign trail helping those candidates who aren't able, those Labour candidates who aren't able to attract the big beast from the shadow cabinet, but nevertheless want some support and assistance. And also it enables me to keep my ear to the ground so that it enables me to know what I'm talking about when I'm talking to you.
Yeah. Do you feel freed doing that? Right, not having to fight your own seat? It was a pretty safe seat, but you put in the hours, you put in the hard yards.
I'm just, my overwhelming feeling about Peckham is I'm so delighted with the candidate who's taken over from me, who's Miata Fanbulla, who I think is going to be an incredibly inspirational figure, not only in Peckham, but nationwide. So she's going to be incredible. So that's my feeling about that. And as far as the rest of the campaign is concerned, you know, it's just, I feel incredibly adrenalized about it and excited about it because, you know, it feels as if we might, despite the fact that we did so badly in 2019 and the Conservatives got 162 more members of Parliament than we in the Labour Party did. That is an enormous gap. And yet we seem to possibly be within touching distance. But I have to keep reminding myself of that because that's a lot of people, a lot of voters who need to change their mind. And everybody's just assuming, because the opinion polls are saying what they're saying, that it's a done deal. But there's a lot of people to change their mind. And I think our you know, party members on the ground and our candidates absolutely know that they've got to work incredibly hard. And they're not just saying that. They've got to work incredibly hard to clinch the deal.
Yeah, that is an incredible turnaround, Harriet. Now, can I discuss this issue of trust in politics and politicians? And I know we in the media will play some role in this, undermining it, building it up. There is a report by Professor John Curtis today, a very respected political scientist, Strathclyde University, probably best known as a polling guru. It's for the National Centre for Social Research, called Damaged Politics. And he's found that 58% of people almost never trust politicians, and complaints have been Partygate, sleaze, other scandals. Cost of living's played a part, but the biggest group who've lost faith in politics and politicians seem to be vote leave people from 2016 who back Brexit and feel they haven't got what they were expecting. How do we tackle that? Because you've been in public life for a long time. You know this crisis of confidence is very, very damaging.
Well, my friend Margaret Hodge, MP, well, she's not an MP anymore because she's standing down. In her last speech in the House of Commons, she said that she felt that trust in politics had really reduced. And I was saying it's always been like that. People have always been sceptical about politics. But I think John Curtis's research has shown that really there has been a drop in trust and confidence. And what happens is if one party blots its copybook, then people think every politician is bad. So that if, for example, the promises weren't kept on Brexit, to have 350 million pounds extra to go into the health service every day, to be cutting immigration to the tens of thousands, instead of them thinking, well, that was the Conservative Party and therefore we won't have confidence in them, the feeling is, oh, they're all the same, they're all not going to deliver. And when the Partygate thing was reported, it cast a stain over all politicians and MPs, not just the party that was engaged in it. But I think there are things that Keir Starmer is going to need to do to actually rebuild trust. I mean, he's going to be very busy if he gets to be Prime Minister. He's got to sort out the wrecked economy. He's got to sort out the public services, but he's also got to sort out people's lack of confidence in politics. And I think one of the things that he will absolutely need to do is not put any promises in the manifesto that he is not prepared to keep. I mean, he just can't. And however difficult and painful those turn out to be, I think he will have to foursquarely stand behind the manifesto.
So you restore trust by acts, not deeds. Sorry, deeds, not words, as the suffragettes would say. Yeah. I
think at least by keeping your promises. I've got no doubt that he's not going to be involved in things like, it's inconceivable that he could be like sort of Partygate type. He's not obviously going to be, he's very sort of public service minded and, very straightforward. So I think the main thing for him to do is to make sure that across the government, all the cabinet ministers keep the promises they make in the manifesto. And I have to say that Rachel Reeves, I think, is very tough-minded about that sort of thing, not because she has made promises she doesn't agree with, but because she actually agrees that to really be very robust with the economy, run a very tight fiscal ship, she actually believes that's the right way to run the economy. She's not just saying that in order to get elected. She actually believes that's the right way to be doing things. So I think if people see a very steady, stable government delivering its manifesto promises, that will go a long way to restoring trust. I think if you think about the immigration thing, sort of election after election after election from 2010 all the way through to the last election in 2019, the Conservatives promised they would bring immigration down to the tens of thousands, and it's gone up to 700,000. And people think that they have been taken for mugs with that. And so it's restoring that trust that the manifesto is what it is, which is a promise of how they're going to govern.
So it's basically living the trust. Making those promises,
yeah.
Giving them, presumably admitting when you fail, when you do?
Well, I think not failing. I think that people are actually fed up with glib apologies from everybody, from whether it's the post office to the contaminated blood, or whether it's to Rishi Sunak saying, I'm sorry for abandoning D-Day. I think that the currency of apologies is not what people want. They want people to do things right so they don't have to apologise for them.
Mm-hmm. Now, Harriet, I can imagine people watching, listening, nodding along with you, as I am. Do you think a general election campaign is a very difficult time to make this change, because parties seem to be in a bear fight, forever levelling accusations at each other, conjuring up figures? Of course, Labour now make a big play about the £2,000, so it is, and I think most people believe, a tax lie from Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives. But I've seen some figures coming out from Labour, which I think, how have you calculated those? I suspect the Office for National Statistics wouldn't approve of the methodology. Do you think it's very difficult to get that trust in a campaign when politics is really at its very rawest?
Well, I think that the Labour side had no option but to fight back against that £2,000 tax increase, which sounded to me like they were saying £2,000 a year, and then it turns out it's £2,000 over 4 years. And then we hear Mel Stride speaking on the radio, who's the Welfare Secretary of State, saying that actually admitting there's going to be £3,000 under their figures increase in tax, and that's already baked in. But who's baked it in? The Tories have baked it in. So, there was no option but for Labour to fight back, because people are worried against a background of the fact that they are paying a lot of tax and they are seeing public services crumble. The idea that, they're seeing their standard of living under pressure. The idea that they should be paying more tax, that is not what Labour's policy is. And therefore we had to get that across. So I think it'll all, it'll be turning over a page if Keir Starmer gets elected, and he will have to give people confidence, give the stability, map out how long everything's going to take and how long, it will take until people see a difference. And I think people will be prepared to give him some time and some space. But I think he's definitely not over-promising, and I think that's right.
Yeah. Do you think Parliament looking more like the country will help restore trust? The number of women, people from ethnic minorities, working class people, number of people who are disabled, because certainly when you joined back in 1982, I think it was just a little more than a dozen women. It's up to 200 now. Or I think it was in 2019 around 200. Labour about 50-50, the Conservatives a quarter women. It's not there yet, but it seems to be getting better. But if it actually did fully represent, so you saw people like you on the green benches, do you think that would help?
Well, when I was first elected in 1982, the House of Commons was 97% men. There was only 3% women. Women were entirely marginalised. It was kind of men-only activity, and Parliament was not representative of 50% of the population. And now that has changed, and I think we're going to be heading towards, obviously depending on the result, but we're heading towards 50% of women in Parliament, towards the biggest number of parliaments, so that it's not an issue anymore. That actually Parliament's male dominated. We're going to see a much nearer representation of the general population of black and minority ethnic MPs. And also we'll see in the cabinet, if Keir Starmer gets elected, actually a whole load of cabinet ministers who were not brought up with silver spoons in their mouths, who would not come from a background of privilege, or the masses of opportunities that somebody like me had. You've got David Lammy, who would be Foreign Secretary, who was brought up on a council estate by a single mum. You've got Keir Starmer. He's told everybody his father was a tool maker. Everybody knows that now. He was the first in his family to go to university. Bridget Phillipson, who will be the Education Secretary, brought up on free school meals. This is the most meritocratic cabinet there's going to be. They are people, Wes Streeting, who also was brought up on free school meals and went to Oxbridge, I think, because he was just incredibly clever and hardworking. This is a real meritocracy cabinet. It's people who understand what it's like to find life hard, and who. So I think there's going to be a lot more working class voices, a lot more women, a lot more BAME, and that is important because there is this undercurrent of an argument that politicians are out of touch, that they don't understand ordinary people's lives, and that they're only in it for themselves. And that's why I think it's important for people to see that Parliament is much more representative.
Again, I can hear and see people nodding along who would agree with all of that. However, Labour's never had a female leader. Now, I know you're not going to write off Keir Starmer first. He looks poised to become Prime Minister. But after 124 years of Labour asking who's the best person for the job and always answering a man, do you think the next Labour leader will and must be a woman? And I'm not saying you're going to be writing off Keir Starmer and giving them a bus ticket to send him somewhere now. But when the time comes, whenever that is, do you think it has to be a woman now?
Well, as you say, we're just at the moment, we're trying to push Keir Starmer into number 10. It's a bit premature to be talking about when he's leaving. We want to see him through that door in Downing Street and hopefully serving more than one term as Prime Minister. So we're talking way, way into the future. However, having said that, it is absolutely ridiculous that the Party for Women and Equality, that's because that's what we regard the Labour Party as, has never had a woman leader, and the Tories have managed to have 3. But I think it's partly because women in the Labour Party are more subversive than women in the Tory party. And I think that, our attitude is that we're here to make change. We're not satisfied with the status quo. And that means that you are seen as a bit more disruptive. Whereas I think until certainly the recent past, the women in the Tory party were very much doing things on the men's terms, and they weren't challenging the Tory party to change. They were just doing it on the same terms as the men. So, I mean, that is a bit of a sort of, pseudo, not very good justification, or at least explanation, but there's no justification, and we really do need to have a woman next time, or it just looks really odd.
Now, at this election, Harriet, Labour's prospects electorally will be enhanced by the split on the right between the Conservative Party and Nigel Farage's Reform UK. Is that bittersweet for the likes of you over the damage that Reform UK can do? Because Nigel Farage is a demagogue. He's preaching bigotry, I think, without any question, always looking for division. Some of the racist dog whistles around Rishi Sunak, claiming he's not patriotic. Rishi Sunak's got a lot to answer for, but to accuse him of not being patriotic, I think we know exactly what Nigel Farage means about that. Is it bittersweet for you that Reform UK will assist Labour electorally, but the poison in the system down the line could be incredibly damaging for Britain?
Well, I think you've put it absolutely right. I mean, you might not remember, but in 1983, where the SDP, who were former Labour people, stood candidates, we lost safe Labour seats because it split the Tory vote. And so when Nigel Farage said that he was going to get back into leadership of Reform, and the Tory party were absolutely shaking in their shoes because they know he will split the vote in seats that have otherwise been Tory, and will, as Rishi Sunak has been pointing out, help Labour get elected in some areas. So, you can't help but notice that is enhancing our chances. Having said that nobody wants to see division and racism come during an election campaign, whipping up division in order to get votes. It's not just a short-term thing. It takes ages to kind of heal the divisions within communities. And I think that after the election, if the Conservatives lose, there's a danger that, there's a threat from Reform that they want to take over the Tory party. The Tory party's already moved quite far to the right because a lot of people like Philip Hammond and Dominic Grieve and Ken Clarke have all been pushed out. Nicky Morgan have been pushed out of the Tory party as being too centrist. So the Tory party's already moved to the right. And if it loses the election, the possibility is it could move even further to the right, under pressure from or taken over by Reform. And always the assumption's been in this country that actually this would make them less electable, because actually you get elected from the centre right or centre left, that you don't get elected from the margins. But that's what we thought about the Republican Party and Trump. And actually we were wrong, because he did a takeover of the Republican Party and has actually managed to pull the whole of politics to a sort of populist right. And we've always thought, that couldn't happen here, but perhaps it could. So, we've got to be careful what we wish for. Yes, it's good if we get more Labour MPs elected, but it only heightens the task and deepens the difficulties that we'll have, not only to rebuild the economy, rebuild public services, but actually rebuild community cohesion in the face of more right-wing populism going on in the Conservative Party.
And Harriet, on that thought, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you to everybody who's been watching. We'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m, same place, same time, for the next Pole Position.
Thank you.